that is Dr. Liam McLaughlin, a lecturer in communication and media at the University of Liverpool. Welcome, first of all, Dr. McLaughlin.
Hi there, Helen. How you doing?
Thank you so much for being with us. Just want to get your initial reaction to listening to that.
Yeah, so online abuse towards politicians is clearly this huge, complex, and nuanced issue, right? And it's terrible what these MPs are receiving, and brings us back to what happened in June 2016 with Joe Cox. There was certainly an element of discussion about what is the real world impact of this online abuse, and it is a present threat. But my main issue, I'd have to say, with this report is that it's really vitally important that we get the right data, right? Like who is being abused is, will actually, and understanding that will lead us to actually solving these problems. Now, unfortunately, I have gone through the BBC report and its methods, and the amount of abuse it's say, they can't actually tell you how much abuse MPs have received from the data that they have, which might surprise some, I suppose, over at the BBC. Issues in terms of kind of how they're determining what is abuse and what's not. I've played around with the API. I've put in horrible hate speech, horrible terms, which have come back as not being abusive in this system that they've used. And I've actually come back and put in really kind of mundane things, which just contain a swear word, and that's been classed as abusive. So it comes us back to this really big problem of what is abuse, right? And we get into the deep down of this and think about it. It's like most people, when they talk about politics online, in the pub, they use colourful language, right? I don't think anyone's been to the pub and they've heard a political discussion that not involves some sort of swear word. And to a lot of people, that would be considered abusive. But actually, to us, is that abusive? Like, is it just colourful language? It's yet to be really determined.
Of course, and just to interact, Dr. McLaughlin, the BBC shared data units have looked into abuse of MPs on social media, and is that analysis of using what is toxic, what is abusive, and so your thoughts on that, because it's all regarding social media, isn't it?
Yes. So what they're looking at in their abuse is they're kind of taking a singular message, they're putting it through a system, and they're saying, is this toxic or not? It's not telling us if it's abusive. It's saying a proportion of this, it could contain language which isn't very nice. That doesn't mean it's abusive, right? So there's quite a lot of issues with that report in that regard. But there could just be a lot of people who, and also a lot of people who are just angry at politics. They're not necessarily, they might be mentioning their MP with the expectation that their MP might not read these messages, right? It's quite common on Twitter for people to mention people they're talking about, but not really expect a response. And I know Charlotte was talking about that she really wants to respond to constituents, and that's a really good thing. That's a fantastic thing to hear. But when we look at the actual data, I think probably only 3% of tweets from my own data anyway, that mention or ask an MP something, get a response from them on Twitter, right? So there's that question as well.
Of course. And would you say as well, Dr. McLaughlin, that, I'll give you an example. Angela Rayner was the Northwest politician to receive the most, followed by Charlotte Nichols, who received 11,000 tweets, with 969 of them being toxic. It's sad that this is just seen, do you think, as part of the job, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's horrific, and when I've spoken to MPs in the past, and again, talking to replicating what the other MPs have already said, it does have a chilling effect. It does make them question them being on the platform. Traditionally, a lot of MPs now, they have their staff go through tweets for them rather than them reading them directly. And that certainly has, it creates a barrier between people being represented and having their views transferred, right? So yeah, it's horrific. It's not something that's good for democracy whatsoever.
As Charlotte said in the piece we've both listened to there, and our listeners as well, many of those aren't her constituents. They're just keyboard warriors. What do you say, and what do you think about people who send these messages? Can you give us a profile? What would you determine them to be as a category? Are these haters? Are these people that have a personal thing for that particular MP, or are these, savvy and they know exactly what they're doing?
It's a good question. I mean, some of them we don't know about. A lot of what we tend to hear, the first thing we hear about is that these are online keyboard warriors who are anonymous, right? Actually, most people put their names to this abuse. They're more than happy to go on Twitter with their full name and say these vile things, which is, so some might find that surprise. Um, but when we think about it, it could just be people who are talking about politics quite kind of colourfully, as I mentioned before. It doesn't all a lot of the data that is contained with this data set might not all, well, the entirety of, might not all contain tweets that are this abusive. They might contain a lot of tweets which is people just being expressive, frustrated about politics, wanting to have their voice heard as well, towards someone who they seem to be a power imbalance. Sorry, right? So it's not an easy it's not easy to classify a single type of homogeneous body of people who are abusive to MPs online. People just might have got up on the bed the wrong side or have an issue they really, really care about who they think that an MP is just ignoring or acting against their own interests.
And what do you think is the way forward then? Is there any way to stop this happening?
I don't think you can turn around and say, oh, we just need to block people who are being abusive online because they'll always come back. You can't just stop people from being anonymous online. They'll find ways around it, especially the bad actors. I think we really need to have a bigger debate as a society about how we conduct politics. I don't think this is something that's just because of social media. People and MPs have been long abused through various forms. This is just a long line of different mediums of which MPs have been abused by. It needs to have a wider kind of debate about how should we talk about politics? How should we conduct democracy? Is it okay that people should be feel ignored to the point where they feel abusive, or do we feel that we need to step in and do something about that?
Sadly, time's beaten us, but many thanks for your insight. That is Dr. Liam McLaughlin, lecturer in communication and media at the University of Liverpool. Thank you so much, Dr. McLaughlin.
Thank you very much.